Welcome to We Question and Learn today. A very special guest from our friends across the broadcast wavelength from WICU and Channel 35. We have Mike Ruzzi here, and welcome.
Tom, it's been great to be here. Thanks for the invitation.
You've been in the community now for...
Well, dating back probably realistically like 1982.
Okay, so we'll have a lot to talk about because
Yeah.
you probably have a long memory. And we're celebrating a birthday, right?
Yeah, 70 years. We had quite a celebration in 2019 at WICU.
Yeah, hard to believe, right?
Well, you know, what's really hard to believe is I've been there for half of that, and it's just
wow.
shocks me that
Yeah.
it seemed like yesterday I was just starting out sitting
You were a
next to
college intern, right? 16 years old, right?
Exactly. 12.
12.
12 when I was in school.
Appropriately for Channel 2.
Yeah. A lot of expansion has taken place since my first day there back in 1984.
Yeah.
I was really fortunate to sit next to Hyle Richmond and Vance McBride and Bill Nupp and Frank Rizzone. They all surrounded me. So I was 21 years old, sitting next to all these veterans and learning every day.
What's your fondest recollection? I mean, or maybe your earliest, of the station? You started as obviously a news reporter, right?
I started out doing weekend sports, and I worked under Phil Fatica, the late, great Phil Fatica, one of my good friends great mentor. And then on Thursday and Friday, I did news reporting. So Thursday and Friday, I did news, and then Saturday and Sunday, I did sports.
Yeah.
And then Phil left to go to WSEE in 1986, and I took over as sports director and stayed in that role until 2013, and then been in the news department anchoring the show since 2013.
Okay, that's not that long ago. So you jumped from sports to news. I was teasing Carol Coleman and Mark Soliday about how we used to have to sweep up the film clippings.
Sure.
Off the floor. You worked with film?
Well, barely.
Barely,
I was in that era where it just started to
yeah.
transition, but when
Yeah.
I interned in Pittsburgh, it was still
Yeah.
film.
Yeah.
And I watched those editors go to work.
What station down there?
WPXI.
Oh, my
interned there.
God, of course.
Yeah.
Wonderful.
Yeah.
But the station itself has been a mainstay, the first station, right? TV station. 70 years ago, and someone said to me there was television 70 years ago.
I know.
In the same place. And so what was it like going from sports to news? That seems like a drastic jump. Well, you were doing some news.
Yeah, I did. I started out with news, not a whole lot. It was only a couple days a week. But after 30 years of sports, Tom, there was a lot of travel involved for me. And I was going a lot, working a lot. And an opportunity came about where I could make this move. And it was a move that was going to be a challenging move. And I like challenges. So I was all in. And really glad that I took advantage of that opportunity. And it's already 7 years now. It's hard to believe.
I believe 7 over 70. Now, back then, was it still owned by the same organization?
It was owned by the Lamb family when I started there.
Same folks. Right?
And then Lilly Broadcasting came in.
Lilly.
Came in the mid '90s.
But that's unusual for something to only have
just
two owners.
Two owners. Yeah.
In this day and age where radio stations and TV stations are traded like greeting cards or baseball cards, forgive me, and you're part of a group, you know, you're owned by many, or you're part of many stations owned by one investment company. You don't even know who owns you from day to day, you know. So news back then, news today, is it the same? Is it different? Is the technology obviously the technology is different?
Yeah,
But
technology
is
gathering's the same, but there's a different focus. Now it's more social media. It's get your story on the web, get your story online, and sometimes you have to do that before you even go on the air. So that's been the biggest change, where the shift is more towards online and the web, where before it was like you would work on your story, and if you had a story that no one else had, you know, you waited until the show came on and you put it out there, and that was about it. Now it's if you have an exclusive story or a big story, you're going to put it online and then go on the air.
I overheard you mention a story once where you had a few minutes to be on the air, but
sure.
you had to put the story online first.
Oh, yeah.
Right.
Every day.
That happens every day.
Yeah, and here's another example. Now, you know, I'm anchoring the 5 o'clock show with Amanda Post, and at 5:10 we get to weather. So the break is 2 minutes long, weather's 3 minutes. I go back into the newsroom, and I do a Facebook Live with Eva Mastromatteo, who's going to join me at 5:30. So that's how much it's stressed to have an online social media presence. We're already teasing ahead at 5:10. I'm live in the studio, but then I'm live on Facebook in another area of the building to tease ahead to a show at 5:30.
That's educational. It's hard to believe. So it would seem you'd have two sets of people doing all this work. Sorry, I hope I didn't formulate a complaint there. It wasn't a complaint. It was an observation that the social media, thanks for that education, is now almost primary.
Yes.
Yeah. Okay. So now the station's 70 years old. You've been doing it for a good long time and have developed some good experiences. Is this a scary thing for you? Let me go one step further. The social media generating the same kind of revenue as the TV station. Maybe that's it must be a big deal.
Well, it's a big deal to try to get the people that are on their phone 24/7 to see what's coming up and to tune in. That's the biggest challenge right now because everybody's holding their phone 24/7.
Yeah.
They're looking down. They're not even looking up to say hello to people. They're looking down at their phone. And you're trying to capture those people to tune in, whether it's 5, 6, 7, or 11 o'clock.
Now, for the sake of education, is there an app or are you doing this directly online or both?
Both.
Okay. So that's another generational thing. Apps are something different.
All my friends watch on the phone, watch our shows on the app.
Yeah.
Erie News Now app. Download that and they watch.
So they
away.
make you stay till 2 in the morning
No.
doing stories?
No.
And coming in at 6 the next morning to backfill? No, you have a good staff. The station has a good news staff.
Yeah, we have Mark and Kara in the morning and then Eva Mastromatteo at noon. And then, I'll come in with Amanda and a few others, John Stalin and Gary Drapshow at 2:30 and we handle the night side.
So you had a big celebration for the 70th in 2019?
We had a great party outdoors near the Bayfront, and
Yeah.
so many people came. And it was just great to see so many faces that I haven't seen in quite a while.
Yeah, you get to look to see who's watching for a change.
Exactly.
Instead of them watching you all the time.
And some veterans that moved on to other jobs came back, like Rebecca Howard joined us, and she went to KDKA and moved back to Erie, and she was there. So there were a lot of people that were on before that came back, and it was great to see her. I haven't seen her in a long time.
And folks showed up just to share your memories.
Absolutely.
Yeah. 70 years. You would think that television would have gone away. It's starting to. You would have thought the internet would have taken over. It is. That's what you're saying.
Yeah.
Do you feel that the station needs to grow geographically then, or subsequently? I mean, you cover a big area now. I mean, you have to go all the way to Bradford, all the way down to Jamestown, back over all of Erie. Of course, Erie is your core.
I think, Tom, the key is just finding those stories that you can't get on your phone. And if you can do that, if you can find that story that you just can't go to your phone and see it, that's a win. That's a big win. And that's what we strive for every day is to come up with those stories that you just can't go to your phone and come up with.
And I would think that stories that are on the air, you have the opportunity to be more in depth because you have more time to prepare. It's not,
Right. Exactly.
Film at 11. Now it's film now.
Right.
Now it's not even film. But it gives you a chance to create some good human interest, politically oriented.
No question about it. We just did a special on Martin Luther King, half-hour special, and then we followed that up with a 1-hour Facebook Live in our studio with some local leaders. And it went over quite well. We got a lot of good feedback about that. And then we had the League of Women Voters come in for a Facebook Live, and I hosted that about a week ago. So that's
totally separate from broadcast, or are you going to broadcast it as well?
Totally separate. It was
Not even put it on the air later? Or?
No. Well, we use clips for a story.
Oh, okay.
But the Facebook Live would run an hour, and people can call in, not call in, but on their iPad.
They respond on their phones.
Right, and ask questions, which was great. So there was a lot of feedback with both of those programs, and you'll see a lot more of them where it's a panel discussion on Facebook Live because you have the time.
That's wonderful. And then you have instant measurement because everything that happens online,
Boom.
with the proper subscription or even the proper gauging of your internet page, you can determine almost who.
Exactly.
Down to the address. Not that you do that. I'm just saying it's possible.
Very possible.
So where do you see this in a couple of years then? Is it you're going to get guys all be sitting in the studio all the time doing stories? And
I see it continuing to grow where we started out with social media and the Facebook Lives and the panel discussions. There's so many opportunities to do those kind of specialized programming where, you can't just, as you know, with your background, you just can't say, well, 8 o'clock on NBC on a Tuesday, we're going to break that hour off. There's programming. Right. There's shows there. You can't do that.
They're locked in. Well, the networks are locked into the dollars and cents. So are you. No offense. But I think as you watch television in Erie over the years, and Buffalo and Pittsburgh, you lived in Pittsburgh, I've lived in Buffalo here. Right. That's 6 o'clock news. And now it's the 5 o'clock and 6 o'clock news. And sometimes I feel sorry for you guys because that's 2 hours straight plus another hour of Facebook.
Right. And in some markets, there's a 4 o'clock news. I believe it's in Buffalo.
Yeah,
WGRZ, and Pittsburgh's had it for a long time. And I wouldn't be surprised that if in 5 or 10 years you wouldn't, you would see one here at 4 o'clock. Yeah. I mean, think about our 7 o'clock has been on probably about 5 years now. And let's go back. When I started in 1984, we had 2 shows. 7 o'clock. Hotline News with Hyle Richmond and Frank Razzone and Shirley Ramsey. And then we had an 11 o'clock show anchored by Bill Knupp and Vance McBride.
Yeah.
That was it. 2 shows.
Yeah.
And then one 11 o'clock show on Saturday and Sunday. And you're going to laugh at this, but our share on a Sunday night was in the 50s. Now, this is like 84, 85, so cable's already in. It's not big, and obviously we don't have everything else. But still, that's incredible to think about.
Well, you guys are on cable. There's a little discussion from time to time. I don't think people understand how that works because they pay you. You don't pay them. And going back to the dark ages when you and I started, I thought, I'm going to pay to be on cable so I can get a bigger audience. It's the exact opposite. Cable is desperate, so to speak, or in need of the local news. So you guys are of great value. So if they decide to poke you in the ribs, they're poking their subscribers in the ribs. And that's probably very upsetting. Because I just put an antenna back on my TV because I disconnected the cable.
Sure.
And HD TV looks much better than cable digital, but that's not the point. You're back to 1954 poking around with the antenna in your window or in your attic or on top of the house all over again.
Well, even go back just to like 2003 or 4, and you look at what the picture looked like then.
Yeah.
And you try to watch an old game or an old show or whatever.
Yeah.
Like, how did we watch that? It's so dark. It's so grainy.
And then when you see reruns, you see those 2 little gray strips on the side of the HD TV, and my son says to me, "Why isn't it across the whole screen?" Well, that was a 3:4 aspect ratio, and they have to cover that up because it doesn't fit the big 16:9 screen. So going back to then, how do you get to? Well, you really you don't have 2 sets for each one set for each station.
We used to at one time.
So you're using one set.
One set. The other part of our studio is used for the Caribbean.
That's right. Yeah.
We do broadcasts for the Caribbean and especially weather.
This is a secret to some folks, but that's an incredibly successful venture, I hear.
Well, I give our owner, Brian Lilly, all the credit. He came up with the idea a long time ago, and he's always been way ahead of the game. I remember talking to him back in like 2005 when I was still doing sports, and he said, Mike, someday soon we're going to be shooting games off our phone, and that's how we're going to get video for games. And he was spot on.
Right on.
And now on my phone, I have an app that's called a CBS app. And I click the on button, and I can be anywhere. And I've used it a lot, whether it's a weather-related story or whatever it is. I click on that. It immediately goes to our server. And our people back at the station can pick it up and put it on the air within 5 minutes.
Interestingly enough, the phones are of good enough quality that you can put it on HD TV.
Right.
If it was an old television, I could see you getting away with it, but that's interesting. So you've revealed a lot as to what's happened over the last 70 years, at least from your recollection, over half of that. Where do you see it all going again? Will you be doing broadcasts all day, or?
I think so.
That's what it's going to be.
I think you're going to see just what you're seeing now, but more of it. You're going to see a lot of news shows, and then you're going to see a lot of them on Facebook Live and online. And I mean, you're going to see more than you're seeing right now down the road. I think that's going to be the biggest thing. We do in the morning, it's called a Nowcast, and Kara Coleman hosts that. It's about a 10-minute show, mainly the big news stories of the day and a lot of weather, and that's strictly right now on Facebook Live, and she does that every day.
Maybe this is a tough question, but as you extend outward into the world, there's probably folks who have lived in Erie their whole lives. Suddenly they're in California.
Oh, yeah.
Are you getting response? Is it negligible? Is it average? Is there some value to that measurement, or you're just anecdotally discovering people are watching you in Hawaii?
Well, it's funny. I mean, I started out with some friends that moved on to markets like Philadelphia and Detroit and Chicago and San Francisco, and they all still live there, and they watch on the app.
And they watch the hometown news.
Yeah, they still watch Channel 12 off the app, which amazes me because they've been gone for decades. And they were only here a short period of time, but they still have an interest in Erie, Pennsylvania.
Regardless of the World Wide Web, people still love Erie, Pennsylvania.
Exactly.
So for folks just tuning in on the web, what's your reach? What's the stations? Well, both stations, right? Is it just Northwest Pennsylvania?
Yeah, I mean,
target market, so to speak.
We go well into Canada, London, and a lot of viewers in London. But
you guys are still on there. We are as well. It's not universally true anymore.
Right.
Yeah.
But I mean, our neck of the woods is definitely Northwest Pennsylvania. From, I would say Jamestown, New York, all the way down to Franklin, Oil City, Ashtabula, Ohio, and then Warren to Bradford.
Those are all
St.
interesting areas. There's a lot of interesting things starting to happen in the old, what I call the Marcellus Corridor from Pittsburgh up to Bradford.
Sure.
And there's some local organizations that have benefited financially from that. So that's not unusual to have or to want to cover Warren or Bradford.
We've had a big presence in the last 5 years in Warren. Always been there in Crawford County, but more so in Warren recently. So.
And that just adds to your audience. So in the 21st century, how do they measure this? Do you buy the old rating books, the Nielsen's? I don't even know what they call them anymore because they've taken over Arbitron. And for folks that don't know, there's measurement. So do you have to purchase measurement, right, still? Is that true?
Yeah, and there's a new setup, and I'm not quite sure what the official name of it is, Tom, but you can get ratings. Before you'd have to wait for a book to come out. Now you can go back just 2 weeks and see where you're at. So it's a system now where you just request a certain week, and then it takes a week to get it to you, and you have it.
I asked Kara and Mark, in their memory, what was one of their favorite or what story affected them the most. Do you have something that you recall that really impressed you about the community or really impressed you as an individual?
It was probably 25 years ago. Jim Del Sandro was the assistant basketball coach at Strong Vincent. He coached under Pete Flynn. They went on to win a state championship. This was early 90s. And he said, hey, we need an MC for the Special Olympics ski meet at the Peak. And I said, that'd be fun. I'll do that. Little did I know how much it would change my life because I get up there. It was literally 10 degrees. No exaggeration, windy. So it's just cutting through you like a knife. And I look across, and there's this little girl. She was about 8 years old at the time, dressed head to toe in red. And that's why she caught my eye. Bright red hat, bright red ski jacket, pants, and boots and gloves. And she's smiling ear to ear. And you could tell that she was blind. So I went over to her, and I introduced myself, and her name was Rachel. And I said, why don't you do the Special Olympics oath with me? That was part of the program. So she did, and she was fantastic. And I said, what event are you doing today? And she said the cross-country ski, which is about 50 yards long, and you have a guide, and the Mercyhurst University students are fantastic. They show up every year. They had 70 We were up there last week for the ski meet. They had 70 volunteers. That's how good Mercyhurst has been, along with Barron, just off the charts. Fantastic, their contribution. Anyway, I'm watching Rachel come to the finish line. And we had our camera there, and our photographer was there. And she gets near the finish line. And I said, Rachel, how are you doing? And Tom, she goes, I'm sweating. And I said, excuse me? She goes, I'm sweating. It's the first time I've ever been in an event, and I got a chance to sweat like all the other athletes. Oh. And that just blew me away. Yeah. Okay? And that story just started that day. Here I found out more about her. She attended every Erie Otters hockey game with her mom, Vicki, for like 15 years, okay? And I sat next to her at games when I'd go cover the games, and it was amazing to watch. She went all off of sound. And she would sit there and she would...
At the arena.
Yeah, and she would say, she'd call some of the players Bubba. Oh, Bubba, why'd you do that? She went off the crowd reaction. Or if there was a great save or a great play, she went off the oohs and the ahs. Yeah. It was amazing to watch. Yeah. And what made her so special was every day at 3 o'clock. Now, this was before cell phones. We had the regular phones. I'd be at my desk. The phone would be ringing. It would be Rachel. This is how long the conversation would last. Hey, Mike, it's Rachel. How you doing? I'm doing great. How are you? Great. Okay, I'll call you tomorrow. That was every day for years, right? Now, this is why this story sticks with me. In 2001, my dad was nearing the end. He battled cancer for 2 years. And the day that he died, obviously I wasn't at the station. Craig Woodard, our weekend guy, answered the phone and said, Rachel, Mike's dad finally passed, blah, blah, blah. It was 2:30 in the afternoon. By 4 o'clock, my mother's phone at her house was ringing. It was Rachel. I just wanted to say I'm sorry to hear about your dad. And you know what, Tom? That morning, she had a procedure where she didn't have to stay at the hospital. It was one-day procedure, and she was out. She had a procedure in the morning for her eyes and was home, and still wanted to call me to see how I was doing. And this is a girl that never had any sight. And then she ended up passing away a few years after that. Oh. And all the Otters came back to her funeral. It was in the summertime. And it was amazing. She touched so many lives. But you talk about someone that was just so positive and had such an impact. I was like, there is no way I can complain about anything the rest of my life after watching her go through what she went through. But the fact that on the day my dad died, she had to get to a phone to see how I was doing after she had a surgical procedure in the morning. How incredible is that? So if Jim D'Alessandro never invited me that day to do the Special Olympic ski meet, I would have never met probably the most interesting and fascinating and heartwarming person I ever met in Erie, by far. And I still think about her all the time, every time we do a ski meet. Just up there last week, the memories come back, and, we do a ski meet, a track and field meet, there's a swim meet, and, anytime I go out and speak, I try to tell that story about here's a little girl that really didn't have a lot. It was just her and her mom, and she gave back, and she touched so many lives. I mean, these guys from the Otters that went into the NHL, they would take her to the NHL game, whether they were playing in Detroit or Pittsburgh, and there she was. They wanted her to be at their NHL game. That's the impact that she had.
What a wonderful story. And I can see why you got involved at the Sight Center subsequently, but I'm sure that's touching. There's no way to follow that. That's your wrap-up story. Unfortunately, I'm going to ask you a couple more questions. So television itself, what do you see? Where's it going? If you don't want to answer that, where do you see 12 and 35 going? What do you think is going to happen? Is it going to be this way, the way it is now for a few years until the market pushes on you?
I just think it's going to continue to grow. I mean, we have grown literally so much in the last 3 or 4 years, and I can't say enough about our leadership team, because they're just always one step ahead. And I don't have a whole lot of years left But I could see it still really.
You look way too young to retire. They're not gonna. They're not gonna let you retire.
I just see 10 years from now them still flourishing because they have been able to think outside the box, and they have an owner that's always been. We have an owner that's always been one step ahead, from Caribbean weather to what we're doing now, and he is. There's a reason why he's in the Broadcasting Hall of Fame, and I could just see them continuing to grow.
Well, when Ronald Reagan pushed to deregulate ownership, remember 7 AMs, 7 FMs, 7 TVs, that's all you got, from the dark ages of capital cities and all the other NBC, ABC, O&Os, and my gosh, you had your big station in New York, you made money. But Erie has flourished as a compliment to you and your fellow broadcasters in this community. You folks, compared to other markets, my opinion, you care.
That's the big thing.
It's different. Yeah. You're owned here. They're not, but the point being is that you folks have all been here a long time, and you don't see that in commercial broadcasting. It's a rolling mill. It's a revolving door. But it's nice to see folks like Kara and Mark.
Well, you care. I mean, there's a lot of people in this town that you hit it right on the head. People care, and that's really the big difference in this city.
So when some people say, why Erie, I think this is part of it.
Why not?
Yeah. And why not? Yeah. So with that, if you could do any one story on anything, regardless of the approval, or of course maybe you're the editor-in-chief to some degree, aren't you? I mean, to some degree. If you had an idea, if you could do one story, and it could be something that you may do anyway, so you don't have to give away the house secrets for an upcoming. What would be the big story for you for Erie and Northwest Pennsylvania?
Right now, Tom, we're working on a series that I can't get in too much but it's called Cold Cases, and we're going to be trying to do these on a regular basis. I just did one with Sabrina Kaler, who was 20 years old when she disappeared in 2002. And as a follow-up to that one, we talked to some of her family members. That's probably going to air next week. And it was just a very emotional interview that we did with her mom and her brother. And we're going to try to do a lot more of those, hopefully once a month if we can pull it off. And I'm really interested because it's just really fascinating to hear the investigators talk about what they went through 20 years ago. And it's agonizing, obviously, to hear from the family members because they're reliving it. But it's a really interesting story. So that's what we're going to, at least what my reporting end, my focus is going to be. Also, I started last summer a series called Trip on the Tank, which I really enjoyed, and we're going to bring that back in the summer. So we're going to do a lot of neat little stops along the way, see how far we can get.
Mike, we've run out of time. News at 5, 6, 7, 11 for you. 4, 5, 6, 7, 10, and 11. Be careful. Plus your ever-rolling Facebook broadcast. I don't know how you do it. Thank you for helping us understand how 12 and 35 have celebrated 70 years of service in the community. And I think there's, from what you said about your party, there's a lot of people who agree with me. It's good that you're here.
Well, I appreciate that. Well, thanks for having me.
Thank you.
I'm Michelle Martin. These days, it seems like just about everybody is choosing sides and doubling down on talking points. Here at NPR, we try to cut through the noise with meaningful and respectful discussions with people from all perspectives, backgrounds, and walks of life. Join the conversation every weekend on All Things Considered from NPR News.
Saturday and Sunday afternoons at 5 on WQLN Radio.
Hi, this is Jeff Hanley, host of Jazz Happening Now. Each week we listen to some of the latest jazz recordings, and I think you'll be thrilled by what today's jazz musicians are doing and saying. The recording industry has changed, but the music is as alive and as vibrant as ever. The future of jazz is happening right now, if you just listen. And please do.
Sunday night at 6 on WQLN Radio.
Normally this time of year we would be interrupting your programming often for our annual spring fundraising drive. This year, everything is different. All of our local media across the community is directing as much time and energy as possible to covering the COVID-19 outbreak. I'm Scott McDowell from Erie News Now. I believe in the mission of WQLN NPR. I know you count on WQLN to keep you informed. We are here for you in the good times and during challenging times like this. But WQLN NPR is still counting on your help to reach our $75,000 spring drive goal to fund this coverage and all of the programming you rely on every day. Donating today means you can look forward to a shorter drive. Call us at 866-5454. You can also make a secure donation online at WQLN.org. Stay informed, stay entertained, stay at home with WQLN NPR.
Welcome to We Question and Learn. We're celebrating our 16th year, and we do devote this program to folks of community interest. And I can't think of anything more interesting than an organization that has survived for 70 years. How's that for an intro? And this is sort of an entertaining thing for me because I have broadcast people in the studio, and I don't get this opportunity very often. Kara Coleman, anchor and reporter for the Erie News Now, and Mark Soliday, welcome.
Hello.
You're both anchors, right? But you're at different times of the day.
No, we're together in the morning.
Okay, see what happens when public broadcasting people don't watch commercial television.
It's okay. We've been together for about 10 years on Erie News Now. It's gone through several different names, but now it's called Sunrise. So
that's wonderful.
We're early birds.
How many years again was that? 10.
We've been together for about 10 years. He's been at the station much longer.
Yeah, I've been on the morning for about 20 years now.
Yeah.
So I've been with the station for 26 now, but about last 20.
Okay, so you're the archivist, right?
Potentially.
One
anyway,
of them.
Yes.
Well, that's the funny thing about WICU and Erie News Now. We have so many of our coworkers who have logged 35, 40 years.
Oh, and you should be congratulated because you folks know what happened in broadcasting over the last 20 years. It's a roundhouse. Everybody's moving or gone or consolidated or...
And Erie's a smaller television market, so we get lots of people coming in and out, especially the young reporters, and they're moving on up. But I think
part of it,
I think that speaks volumes to our station and our company, Lily Broadcasting, for people to stay there.
My understanding from my friends in the big city, they're all gunning for your job now. It's much safer in the middle markets where things are much more. But that adds to your credibility and it adds to the content that you add to the air. And thank you for being here. This is absolutely wonderful.
Fun for us.
Yeah, 70 years. You and we can't remember that far back, but 1949.
March 15th, 1949 is when WICU first brought television to Erie. I grew up in Erie, born and raised here. Same with Mark. But I really delved into our 70th anniversary this past summer when I was kind of tasked with doing a 30-minute special. And so that's when I kind of learned more than I ever thought I would on the history of our station and 70 years in the community.
You got to think, when you go back to 1899, I think that's when Zern Industries was founded. Of course, that's long gone. And Lord Corporation and AMSCO, all those guys in the 20s. So you've encompassed a lot of Erie's history that is relative to the age of the station. So you must have wonderful archives and great stories.
Oh, we do. And that's the benefit of having folks like Lisa Adams, Paul Wagner, Mark on staff, that you can just go over and walk 10 feet across the newsroom and ask them,
The archives of the mind. And some of our veteran reporters are pretty precious.
So March 5th, okay, this will be on the air in time for that, so that's great. So what was your job initially when they said, we're 70? Did they come to your desk, both of you, or how did this start?
This summer I kind of switched shifts, so I was actually off the morning show and more of doing some special reports, and that's when our general manager Pam Forsyth said we want to do a couple things to celebrate our 70th. So not only do we want to put on this 30-minute special, but we also want to throw a big party, which we did. A party down at Liberty Park, down at the Bayfront. That was back in July. It was a very hot July day. We had hundreds of people come out and just celebrate with us. We also buried a time capsule back over the summer that we're going to be opening up on our 100th anniversary.
What a great idea.
Yeah, so it's just been really a fun
We spent a
year.
month quizzing our viewers on trivia connected to the television station and some of the history of that. And so we were kind of interacting with some of the audience members and probably some of the more veteran audience members who would know the answers to these trivia questions.
Well, Mark,
So,
I think you go as far back as I do, where 2-inch tape,
yes.
tape decks,
Yes.
film chains,
Absolutely, yes.
film chains.
Not the film
You
chain,
didn't
not
go
quite
as far
that
back
far
as
back.
film
No,
chain?
2-inch was what the commercial. Our cameraman who's over there, Tom, he's nodding. Yes,
He's been
he
here
goes,
40
He goes
years.
back to 2-inch
Yep,
tape.
2-inch tape,
3/4 inch tape was what they were using
Yeah.
when I first started.
And then
so.
beta. But we're going back to when they used to dump film on the editing floor. No, you're...
No, but people
He
like
does.
Tom have told me the stories. Yes, and it's hard. It's hard for me to communicate to the younger folks. Maybe some of the technology that's making their jobs easier, although they're doing more and more and more. But when you take a look back at what I was dealing with, 25 years ago, and what we've got technology-wise
you
today,
folks
it's a
don't touch
different world.
anything mechanical anymore, other than a microphone, maybe.
Well, that's the funny thing about what we're doing these days with cell phones. I mean, we are tasked with doing Facebook Lives every morning just to touch base with our viewers. We actually have the ability, even if I'm at home with my kids and I see something happening in my front yard, I have the ability to pick up my phone, record, and send it right to the station. Instantly. So it's really remarkable what we can get on the air and how quickly we can get it on the air. I mean, we can get breaking news on the air in 5 minutes.
Right.
I watched your video online. I was in tears. I saw things that actually existed that don't exist anymore. No offense to you. But the technology back then, there was none, so to speak. It was all tape and running around. And I don't even remember how they recorded things.
When I first started, they had they weren't using it, but the weather, the map, the giant
Velcro.
physical map
We
with
used
magnets. And,
we used rubber cement and cut out letters,
Oh
and
my
then they
gosh.
came out with sticky letters. What a blessing! And the camera would pan down the credits as they were glued onto the wall.
Right.
But we're too young to remember all
Well,
that.
during our 70th special, John Stalin, our chief, did a piece on weather over the years, and I think the very first weather broadcast, at least on the Today Show, which he was showing video, was a chalkboard United States and somebody writing rain, up the eastern seaboard. So it's just so funny to think back.
Kara and Mark, as you look at the history, how far back did your research go? Day one, right?
Yeah,
You
day
have
one.
good enough archives to have described all that?
Yeah, well, the Erie Dispatch, I went down to the library and looked at a lot of the old articles, and it was funny, a couple of things. The headline in the Erie Dispatch the following day after the first broadcast, after TV came to Erie, was "Thousands Watch Television Magic," given
Thousands,
by WICU.
and I think magic was what was
Yeah.
the proper word for people.
Well, you're
in
the
that
first
time.
one on the air.
We were the first on the air, yep.
So you had to think about how many people really had TVs, some of which
Not a
the
lot.
screens were round.
Right?
Yeah.
Well, a lot of the Erie Dispatch documented how people crowded around TVs in department stores just to get a first look. But it was also funny if you page through some of those articles on March 15th, March 16th, March 17th, and even the weeks leading up back in 1949, there were so many ads for buy a television now so you can watch the first days of WICU. So there was a build-up to our launch that was really, really exciting as well.
Then they found out how difficult it was to tune in via the rabbit ear.
The first day of struggling with that, getting the signal in.
Hey, we're back to that now. Think about it.
It's true.
Also, I looked a lot at the Life magazine. They did a whole feature on Erie.
Life magazine.
Life magazine.
Okay, so this is one of the first stations.
Exactly, in the entire country, and that was one of the significant.
I think
certainly in a city the size of Erie.
I think there were like 61 other stations, but they were mostly in those bigger cities, which Erie was
pretty good.
Yeah, not bad at all. But Life magazine did a whole feature on Erie in the first days of television, and to read this, and it's accessible down at the library, it's hilarious. It says, WICU's first days on air were like a one-ring circus without the elephant act. So I think it was chaos. It was a lot of people in and out, and they were kind of filling it with network programs, old movies. They had talent shows, fashion shows. So whatever they could really put on
It was real
the
community
air.
television.
Absolutely.
Back then. It really fulfilled a good mission.
You wanted to sell a car, you drove that car in through the garage door, and you
right?
did the ad
Yes.
right there live. Yes.
Oh, swap shop for television.
And I think in the first days also it had local businesses seeing this opportunity for marketing that hadn't been there before. So a lot of the first days were also, beer companies holding up their product and kind of advertising live on air.
Yeah, we were coming off radio in the 40s, and people had no qualms about the Lucky Strike program. No holds barred on cigarettes and whatnot. So people actually physically came to the station with product.
Yeah.
Oh yeah, absolutely. That's why the studio still has a garage door, which has been encompassed by expansions. It's now within the building. This was a former exterior door. Yeah,
that's the original building, right? Am I correct?
It is. It's been
original
expanded
building.
on, but
Yep.
a couple of times.
3514 State Street. And what's interesting is Edward Lamb built the station. He was the guy behind it. He was the newspaper owner, but he built it. It was the first station that was built solely for TV. First station in the country built solely for TV, and he said he built it to be the most successful and useful television station in the nation, which I
From
always thought was
scratch,
interesting.
day one.
Yeah, from
Even
scratch.
before people understood that television was a commodity.
And we have
gambled everything on
yes,
this,
and we
didn't
have video of the groundbreaking of WICU, which I think is really cool. But yeah, we are still there at 3514 State Street.
Yeah. So you folks put a history together, created a program. What are some of the more interesting things to either of you?
Well, Mark, you did a whole piece on those technology changes that we kind of just touched on.
Honestly, just we going from the seismic shifts of black and white to color, and then HD, and now 4K potentially is getting that. We're transforming and transitioning into that. I think those were some of the big technology trends that folks at home have been able to take part in. As far as us within the workspace, we've been able to utilize satellite technology. Like now we're bringing in live images on the news cast from all over the world every morning through various sources. So I think there's just been so many outside technology changes that the viewers can enjoy, and then technology advancements within the building that allow us to deliver a high quality product to the folks.
So over 70 years, are you fearful the box will go away, or the box will be transformed? This will be your box. Your phone will be your box. Are you all prepped up for that?
I think we're getting there.
We're well on our way.
Yeah,
I think kind of a shift over the past couple of months has been this effort to bring news to people, whether it's on TV, whether it's on our website, whether it's on your phone, which we know you have with you 24 hours a day. So we've already kind of begun that kind of dual work of keeping up our product on the air and also kind of adapting
it's our ongoing challenge.
Yeah.
Well, thankfully, folks like you won't go away because you're the content,
Sure.
regardless of the media. But 70 years is a huge accomplishment. Stories. What are the big? And each of you could take a story. Would you mind doing that?
Sure.
What was the big story for you, Kara?
Well,
Too many.
there are a lot. Well, one of the pieces that I did for the 70th anniversary show was I brought Lisa Adams and Paul Wagner out to coffee and mic'd them up, and we had cameras rolling, and we said, "You two go." because they've been here 40 years, which puts my 10 years, pales in comparison. But we told them, you guys talk about the stories you've covered and the ones that kind of stick out. And they took us through the Albion tornado of 1985, actually, which was unique. Both of them were out of town that day. Paul was actually in China with the bishop, I think, maybe.
Mayor?
Maybe the mayor.
Mayor
Yeah,
Tullio.
Mayor Tullio.
Yes,
I'm
that's
sorry.
right.
He was in
That's
China.
how they got the statues in front of the building downtown.
Yes,
Or in the hall.
so he was in China and he was returning the next day, and he said they landed in Chicago and saw like a headline in the Chicago Tribune that said Erie devastated by tornado. Well, those days they didn't have telephones, so they ran to a payphone. Well, it was Erie County that they were referencing. So he remembers kind of getting back into town, and he said he thinks he was in Albion for 3 weeks straight, just covering that. Lisa said she was also off that day, but she was coming in the following day to anchor, but she wanted to see it for herself. So she drove out there. And she said it was just devastation as far as you could see. So that was really, I think, a big one that both of them remember very, very well.
Those are the kind of stories that make television important. It's immediate. You get to see what's really going on. The truth comes out, so to speak.
And that's also kind of a story that crossed those lines into weather. That's also a story that our weather folks really remember very vividly.
I think, I was on staff September 11th, and I think no matter where you were and what angle or what portion of that big story that you were trying to cover, that day is always going to stand out in my memory. We rushed out to Erie's airport. They were landing, planes anywhere. They were at the closest airport, and so just being out at the airport and kind of feeling that tension that was
I was there that
through the whole
ready to leave. We didn't leave.
Right. And so exactly, you know exactly what I'm talking about, that just being a part of that day. And pretty quickly I think all of us were able to sense the national gravity, the historic significance of all of this, that 20 years later, whatever it would be, we're still talking about it. And so that, to me, just being a part of even the local coverage of September 11th was something I'll never forget, and being out at the airport that day.
And to get that is important because people want to hear about what's happening here.
Right.
What's happening in our community. What other outreach stories do you remember?
I remember, I wasn't working here at the time, but I remember the pizza bomber case. I was in college and actually doing my college news radio station talking about it. But that was one that Paul Wagner has followed very closely over the years. And actually, Dateline from NBC was in town this past fall interviewing Paul about a special that they ran on the pizza bomber case. And of course, the Netflix show Evil Genius kind of ramped up the excitement over it. But Paul just said once a month he still gets the question when he's out on a story, what was she like? And Marjorie Dale Armstrong, of course. So that's one that I think.
Right out this window.
Yes, yes. So that's one that's really, stuck out to him.
Sometimes the most memorable stories from maybe our perspective as journalists may not be the most impactful to a wide audience. One of my first stories that I reported on a long time ago was about a situation out on the interstate highway where a woman and her young child were driving, and a giant piece of rock was picked up by a semi, hurtled through their windshield, and really critically injured this woman. And her son, who was, I believe, 12 at the time, after having this incident happen to his mom in the driver's seat, was able to take the wheel of that car and get it off the highway, safely bring it to a stop. She was really badly injured and had some lifelong injuries, basically, that weren't going to be recoverable from. But she did survive that thanks to her son. And just to get to talk to her daughter, who was an older, and then talk to her young son about, what it all meant to not just go through that situation, but to become a hero, basically, in that sort of a situation. So those stories that may not, affect a million people, they just affected really that one family, but so dramatically. Those, to me, can be some of the most powerful to cover.
Regardless of the digital things that are about to come, I mentioned that people are the most important. You probably have some great folks that worked over the years.
Oh my goodness, yeah. That was one of the pieces we focused on in our 70th celebration. Mike Ruzzi, who's also been there. What is Mike up to, 35 years? He's close, and he's done the sports and the news thing, but he kind of did a Where Are They Now? And he talked to Dylan, not Dylan, but Dylan was one that we had talked about, Dylan Dreyer, who you can see on the Today Show, got her start at WICU in Erie. Cheryl Scott, who's now in Chicago, Rebecca Hauer, Kieran Chetri. So he kind of touched base with a lot of those folks. He actually talked to Kathy Fatika. Phil Fatika was a beloved member of our staff. So just kind of looking back and touching base with some of those folks.
And there have been so many. These are some of the bigger names. Kieran Chetri spent a lot of time on CNN and Fox News, and Rebecca Hauer had a successful time down in Pittsburgh. But when there are more names that maybe didn't make it to the network level, but have certainly come through WICU over the years and have gone on to success in maybe slight mid-sized markets, bigger markets.
I think you recognized in the first place. Now, of course, people work from small markets. Sometimes the bigger ones. Sometimes they come down and they're happier here.
Yeah.
You've got some folks that have worked a long time that said this is a better place to be.
Yeah, I think I'm one of those.
Yeah,
I am too. I worked in other markets and then decided to come on back home, and I've loved it ever since.
You were in Mississippi, North Carolina. You've been around
Yeah.
at some great stations.
I graduated from St. Bonaventure and
great
moved
school.
to Mississippi.
Yeah.
One of my professors once told me, your first job is going to be really far away and you're going to be paid pennies. And he nailed it. Yeah, Greenville, Mississippi in the Delta was my first TV job. But I think
But
Home
that had
Sweet
to have been
Home-
exciting to a good degree.
I mean, I was 22 years old.
Yeah.
It was my parents said, absolutely not, you're not going to Mississippi, and I said, I'll walk there. And so it was fun. And it's great. I think it was also great to get a start like away from friends and family. I think I would have been too nervous, but then making the decision to come back home, I've never regretted it. And that's also one of the things I love about working in a place that is still my home where I'm raising my children, is I've done stories on my dad. He's in the Pennsylvania Sports Hall of Fame for golf, on my brother playing baseball, on my nieces and nephews at their schools. And so I love that, where I also get to cover the community as a whole. I also get to sometimes cover, my little neck of the woods and things that my family and friends are doing. So that really means a lot to me as well.
I agree. That's the great part about working where you grew up, and you're talking about the Prep McDowell game, but you were at the game or whatever last night.
Well,
so
you're McDowell and game,
yes,
right?
Correct. Yes.
So are you Erie the whole time?
Yes, I'm Erie through and through. Yeah.
Well, you couldn't have a more qualified person to write a local story.
I
You
suppose.
probably know more things than you care
He
to
does.
tell us.
There's so many times we'll do a story and perhaps it'll cut to sound and Mark will be like, I went to high school with that person, or oh my gosh, I remember working with that guy back in
Right.
blah, blah, blah. But Mark and I both went to J.S. Wilson.
Correct.
And McDowell.
Yeah.
So,
That's great.
Yeah.
So your station has survived for 70 years. Is there some secret to this? Is it people's affinity for the station, or is it because your folks have been sort of family to the community because you've been
go
there
ahead.
so long?
I feel like the secret to the longevity of WICU has been the family ownership, really, over the course of the years. We've never been a part of a corporation, certainly not a big one. We went from the Lambs to the Lilies, and that's where we are today.
now.
And so it's always been a family-owned station. Our owner, Brian Lilly, for the longest time lived right across the street from the physical studio, and we'd see him, every day or every, once a week, certainly, or something along those lines. And he's still in town, so we've got those ties that I think, the local ties, I think, are what make Erie or WICU such an integral part of Erie.
And just one example of how we're really a big family. Brian Lilly has a little boy who outgrew a tricycle, and he said,
right.
give it to Kara. She has little boys. So I now have, so it's just that family, really that family atmosphere. We actually all just celebrated at our Christmas party
That's
this
right.
past Saturday. So yeah, I think it's that family ownership. It's that family feel when you're in the building. And knowing that there's so much history among the staff, I think just makes it really legendary.
There's a definite, commitment on the part of the Lilly family to Erie. And
It's an unusual story in broadcasting
Yes,
today.
absolutely.
Where stations are traded like poker chips.
Yes.
And in big batches, no less. So we're glad that you're here. Where is it all going? Each of you answer that. Where's ICU going for you and in general? And where do you see television going?
Well, I mean, if we were to fast forward another 70 years, I mean, and I remember Paul Wagner saying in our piece, I know it's going to change. I don't know how it's going to change, but I know it's going to change. I think we'll always be coverage you can count on. I think there is always going to be a need for local news, always. And what better way than from local people?
And your good interview programs.
Yeah, for sure.
absolutely.
For sure.
Thank you, Lisa.
Yeah, the insider, she does a fantastic job.
Yeah.
So I think it's going to be about local news. I think a lot of it is going to be from your cell phone, perhaps. Our general manager, when we talked to her about this, she said, I see holograms being part of local news in
I think
70
CNN
years.
tried that. Didn't work right.
But you think, like, no,
Well,
it won't
HDTV
happen.
made some announcers very nervous. You could see too much.
And here's the thing, from my perspective, a little older, and Tom, you can maybe weigh on this as well. When you look back to the predictions for technology that were coming out 25 years ago and where we are now, some were correct and some were way off. So, predicting that far ahead is tricky at best. But I think in general, Kara's correct that it is transforming, at least in terms of instant information to your phone. There's always going to be, I think, a need for that big screen, for the movie, for the sporting events. But as far as conveying news, information that everybody is looking for on a daily basis, it's really it's transitioning to that small screen.
And a lot of our reporters now, when they're out on a story, say it's at 1 o'clock in the afternoon and our next broadcast isn't until 5, they're still doing a Facebook report live from their phone. So it's not the typical, framed up steady shot that you may think. They're in selfie mode doing this. Yeah.
It's on.
Yes, and it's them holding their cell phone. So I think it's going to be a lot more of that too. Kind of reporters peeling back that curtain and showing you.
Some of those standards are shifting a little bit. I mean, there were, many go back a few years, and the viewers might not stand for a shaky selfie type of shot. But I think as these things become more commonplace, those expectations are shifting.
Well, I know people are trying that with their own phones. It's not quite the same as having folks that know how to do this.
Sure, and I think there's an element of, a little bit of training and definitely
experience.
Yes, experience. But it's also that taking the viewer along with you and, bringing them right to the scene and let me show you this and just turning that camera around. And sometimes I think that may frighten our veterans like Tom, 40 years in the business, lugging around that equipment that weighs 100 pounds. But there's also going to be always a need for that and that steady camera work and that professional stuff that we can take back and put the story, but also that, on the spot news and taking you with us as we get to the scene.
I think the people in Erie who can, talk to us directly and who know us, we know them. It's a nice situation because there's a level, I think, and hope of trust that the community has in, say, Kara and myself, because we're your neighbors. We're not in Washington. We're not in New York City. We're dealing with the same issues and concerns that everybody within this community is. And so I think that's what makes local news a very, in a community the size of Erie, very special and very important. And as Kara mentioned, I don't think it's, it will transform, it will transition, but it's not going to go away.
Kara Coleman, thank you so much. You've been wonderful.
you.
Mark Soliday, what an honor meeting you face
Thank
to
you,
face.
sir.
I feel like your family. Because I've seen you so often.
That's very kind.
And
That's a compliment.
It develops a sense of confidence in what you say, too, as well, when you see people that are not cycling through on the air, which is very scary. So someone's been in broadcasting for 50 years.
Well, it's funny, especially I think with morning folks, they do not like change. And so anything that changes up, even if I go on maternity leave, or they do not like it. So, folks, they like.
Call it a morning routine for a reason.
Well, it's okay.
So
A
we
few
try to keep
technology
that.
changes is great as long as they keep the people. Thank you so much for being here.
Thank you, Tom.
We really
Thank
appreciate
you.
it. Thank you
so much.